Have you ever felt like you no longer belong to this world, as if you're playing the role of a human but your mind stands just outside of it, quietly watching, gently waking, as if from a long dream? If so, listen closely. You may be nearing the final chapter of a sacred journey through lifetimes. In this video, we will uncover the signs, the whispers from the universe, that some souls have learned enough, endured enough, and are now returning home. Don't leave halfway through. Every moment that follows may remind you of something you've never truly forgotten. And if something in your heart recognizes this as truth, subscribe, ring the bell of remembrance, because you are not alone in this. We are awakening together. Sign 1. Feeling like a stranger in the human experience. There is a peculiar sensation that clings to certain souls. One that does not come from trauma, nor from confusion, but from something far deeper, older, and more sacred. It is the quiet, almost indescribable feeling that you do not quite belong here. You smile, you participate, you fulfill your responsibilities, you build relationships, pursue goals, even experience moments of joy, and yet something within you remains untouched by all of it, not in bitterness, not in numbness, but in a holy distance, as if your soul is walking beside your life, not inside it. This is not the detachment of depression or emotional collapse. It is the echo of memory, a memory of having lived too many times to be fooled by illusion once more. Somewhere within you there is a silent knowing that this world is not your first, nor your true home. You may not have the words for it, but you carry a sense that you've walked this path before, worn this body before, spoken these words before. And now, you are no longer here to experience, but to complete. And it shows. While others chase titles, affirmation, or fleeting pleasures, your heart yearns for something that cannot be purchased, cannot be posted, cannot be possessed. The world rushes to consume and accomplish, but you stand still in the storm, listening for something no one else seems to hear, a whisper from beyond the veil, calling you not forward but backward, inward, homeward. You feel like a stranger, not because you reject the world, but because you see through it. You notice how people live on autopilot, waking, working, wanting, and you wonder, is this all they see? You can sit in a room full of laughter and still feel the sorrow of the earth. You can participate in the rituals of success, career, marriage, ambition, and still know in your bones that none of it touches the eternal. You carry a gaze that pierces through the surface of things, and it's not because you're ungrateful, but because you've known something greater, something that once surrounded you like light. So holy, so complete, that this life feels like a fading dream in comparison, and perhaps it is. The sacred texts once said, "They are in the world, but not of the world." You know this not as doctrine, but as lived experience. While others attach their identity to their achievements, appearances, and affiliations, you are slowly unraveling from all of it. You feel less interested in becoming someone, and more drawn to remembering who you were before the forgetting. Where there was once ambition, there is now stillness. Where there was once striving, now there is surrender. The things that once defined you now feel like costumes in a play you no longer wish to perform. And yet you still show up. You still live. But your eyes are elsewhere, watching the sky, listening to the silence between words, searching the faces of strangers for someone who might remember too. There is no bitterness in this state, only a kind of sacred weariness, a soul-deep fatigue that does not seek escape but transcendence. You have lived enough to know that the game cannot be won because the game itself is the illusion. You are not tired because life is cruel. You are tired because your soul has traveled long and far, and now longs not for excitement, but for completion. You have died and returned more times than can be counted. You have loved and lost in empires now reduced to dust. You have wept at the edge of history and healed in places that no longer exist. And now, This lifetime feels like the last page of a long, sacred book. This feeling is often isolating. The world doesn't understand it, and often neither do you. Friends may see you as distant, even cold. Family may sense your detachment, but never grasp its depth. But what they perceive as distance is, in truth, devotion. Devotion to something greater than what meets the eye. You are not running away from the world. You are simply not running with it anymore. You are not bitter, you're just awake. And when the world feels loud, artificial, and unbearably shallow, it is because your soul is no longer willing to pretend that it is asleep. This is not arrogance. This is not spiritual pride. This is remembrance. Something ancient is awakening in you, and it refuses to be sedated by entertainment, approval, or routine. And when you try to explain it, words fail. How do you describe to someone that you remember the stars, that your soul aches for a place it cannot name but knows better than this one? How do you confess that the sound of a distant wind or the look in a stranger's eyes can move you to tears for reasons you cannot explain? You are not broken. You are not disconnected. You are not alone. You are, in fact, remembering. And that remembering is the first sign of a soul that may be living its final incarnation. Because those nearing the end do not seek to escape the world, they seek to understand it. They do not hunger for more, they hunger for meaning. And when all the illusions fall away, when ambition dissolves into presence, when striving gives way to stillness, they are left with a strange, beautiful ache. Not to achieve, not to belong, but to return. And so if you feel this way, if your joy is quieter, your sadness deeper, your heart softer, and your eyes always searching for something just beyond the horizon, take heart. You are not lost. You are nearing the end of the road, and the landscape is changing. You are not meant to fit into this world. You are here to transcend it. Stay with us. Your journey is holy, and this is only the beginning of the end. 2. Sign 2. Deep and vivid déjà vu with hidden knowledge. There comes a moment, sudden, silent, when time folds in on itself. You walk into a place you've never been before, yet your body moves as if it remembers every corner. The conversation unfolds, and somehow you know what the next sentence will be. A face you've never seen stirs a longing you cannot name. This is not imagination. This is not coincidence. This is the veil thinning. Déjà vu, to most people, is a curious glitch, an odd sensation quickly dismissed. But for some, it is more than that. It is frequent, vivid, and accompanied by knowledge that defies logic. It does not simply feel familiar, it feels known. It does not pass in seconds, it lingers, like a sacred whisper echoing from a place outside of linear time. And when it speaks, it says, "You've been here before. You knew this before. You are more than this moment." For souls nearing the end of their incarnational journey, déjà vu is not a curiosity, it is confirmation. It is not a glitch in memory, but a glimpse through memory, a piercing of the illusion of sequential time. You begin to realize that your soul, unconstrained by this life, carries an archive far greater than your current mind can access. And from time to time that archive leaks through. A moment breaks and wavers, and something eternal steps forward. You may find yourself having insights you cannot trace to anything you've read or learned. You may know how to navigate situations you've never encountered or solve problems instinctively without any training. Certain historical periods feel more real than the present. Certain languages seem familiar even though you've never studied them. You are not delusional, you are remembering. For these moments are not hallucinations, they are revelations. The soul is beginning to bypass the limitation of this body, this name, this life. The linear mind tries to keep things in order, past, present, future. But the soul knows that time is a wheel, not a line. All lifetimes are happening within the same field of consciousness. All stories are being told at once. Your awareness is simply shifting focus, sliding between frequencies like tuning a radio. And in those flickers of déjà vu, your soul is reminding you that it is not limited to this station. It has known other songs. There is something holy about this recognition. It humbles you. It opens you. Because with each moment of déjà vu comes the quiet awareness that life is not random. It is not chaos. It is a composition carefully designed, divinely woven. And you are not a spectator. You are part of the music. You are a note in the great unfolding. This awareness may at first be disorienting. You might question your sanity. You might try to brush it away, to stay grounded in the material world. But the more you resist it, the louder it calls. Not to pull you out of reality, but to expand your sense of what reality truly is. You are not meant to shut the door. You are meant to walk through it. There may come a time when you sense a presence beside you when no one is there. When dreams bleed into waking life. When your intuition becomes more accurate than your logic. When you know something before it happens, not out of desire but out of deep resonance. These are not accidents. These are activations. The soul, in its final incarnation, is not asleep. It is stirring. And as it stirs, the walls between lifetimes begin to dissolve. You may feel like you're dreaming through your waking hours, not because you're disconnected, but because your consciousness is expanding beyond this one timeline. You are seeing reality from multiple vantage points. You are touching the infinite within the ordinary. This shift can be lonely. Others may not understand it. They may tell you it's just your imagination, or suggest you focus on the here and now. But what they do not realize is that this remembering, this reawakening, is the here and now for you, because the present moment is no longer a trap for your attention. It is a portal, and every déjà vu is an invitation to step through. Eventually, you stop fearing these moments. You stop hiding from them. Instead, you welcome them. You learn to rest in mystery. You stop demanding explanations and begin listening for meaning. You begin to see that your soul is not bound to the timeline you were born into. You are not the product of your past. You are the convergence of many pasts. And more than that, you are the awareness that sees them all. There is a term the mystics used, anamnesis, the loss of forgetfulness. That is what is happening to you. You are not learning, you are remembering. You are not becoming spiritual, you are uncovering the truth that you have always been. As this remembrance deepens, your relationship with the world begins to change. You no longer search for meaning in possessions or praise. You begin to trust the intelligence of your intuition. You follow the signs, not the scripts. And life begins to feel less like something you're building and more like something. So if you have lived with déjà vu that no longer feels random, if you've felt ancient in your youth or known things you've never been taught, if your life is filled with echoes, patterns and glimpses of something just beyond the veil, then you are not malfunctioning. You are remembering, and your remembering is sacred. Stay awake. Trust what comes, because these flashes are not illusions. They are breadcrumbs, leading you back to the soul you've always been, and the journey is just beginning. 3. Sign 3. A calm, almost intimate relationship with death. There is a quiet stillness that begins to settle in the heart of a soul nearing the end of its incarnational journey. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it doesn't shout or seek to be understood. It simply is. Like a flame that no longer dances wildly, but burns with unwavering steadiness. And at the center of this stillness is something most of the world runs from: death. For the average person, death is the great unknown, the feared ending, the final darkness. It is pushed aside, cloaked in denial, wrapped in euphemisms, and avoided in every conversation. But for the old soul, for the soul approaching completion, death is no longer an enemy. It becomes a companion, a presence not of threat, but of truth. you begin to notice it, not with fear, but with familiarity. It lingers at the edge of your awareness, not as a shadow, but as a mirror. It reflects not endings, but transitions. You sense that death is not a wall, but a doorway, a return, a soft undoing of everything that was never really you. This awareness doesn't come from morbid thought or nihilism. It is not rooted in depression. It is the fruit of countless lives lived, lost, and released. After dying many deaths, the soul begins to remember that death is not the opposite of life. It is the opposite of birth. Life continues. What changes is only the form, the scenery, the costume. The actor, the consciousness beneath, remains. There is something deeply sacred in the way this shift unfolds. Where others avoid the topic of death, you begin to meet it with curiosity, even reverence. You do not rush toward it, nor do you deny its eventual arrival. Instead, you allow it to inform how you live. You understand that the value of a moment is not in how long it lasts, but in how fully it is lived. And in this way, death becomes your teacher, not your tormentor. You begin to release the grasping, the desperate attempt to immortalize yourself through success, legacy, control. You no longer fear vanishing, because something within you knows you were never just this body to begin with. The fear that once ruled your choices fades, not suddenly, but subtly. You stop chasing things that promise permanence, because you finally see that nothing here was ever meant to last, and instead of mourning that truth, you find peace in it, even beauty. You start to notice that the idea of dying doesn't stir panic in your chest anymore. Perhaps it once did, but now the idea seems quiet, gentle. You may even begin to feel as though you've already experienced death many times over, and in some strange way you have. Pieces of you have died across lifetimes. Old identities, old attachments, old wounds. You have shed names and faces like seasons, and the one constant has always been the one watching it all unfold, your eternal self. Sometimes you catch glimpses of this remembrance in your dreams, a tunnel, a bright field, a familiar presence waiting in silence. Or maybe you've already had near-death experiences, or been with others as they crossed the threshold, and in those moments you felt something unexplainable. Not terror, but tenderness. Not loss, but love. As if death was not stealing something from you, but returning something you'd forgotten how to receive. This relationship with death becomes intimate, not because you obsess over it, but because you make peace with it, and from this peace comes clarity. You begin to live not in the fear of what might be taken, but in gratitude for what is given. You love deeper. You listen longer. You forgive faster, because you know that none of this is guaranteed, and that's what makes it holy. You stop postponing your joy. You stop waiting for someday to begin. You understand that each breath is sacred because it is fleeting, and so you breathe it in with reverence. Not because you are afraid it will be the last, but because you know it eventually will be, and that's what makes it matter. This is the wisdom of a soul no longer held hostage by survival, a soul that does not cling but offers. You give of yourself more freely, not because you expect a return, but because you know that giving is itself the point. You understand that your legacy is not what you build, but who you become, and that becoming has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with love. You may find yourself drawn to the stories of those who have passed. You may find peace in graveyards or quiet comfort in the presence of endings. You begin to see beauty in decay, purpose in impermanence. A dying tree in autumn no longer looks tragic. It looks like truth. A truth you now carry in your own being. That nothing real can be lost, only transformed. You may notice that others still flinch at the subject of death, that they avoid it, dread it, deny it. And when you sit with them in their fear, you do not preach, you presence. You become the calm in their storm. You carry a knowing in your silence, and they feel it, even if they cannot name it. You have become the embodiment of something eternal, and in your calm, others begin to remember what they too have forgotten. This is the mark of one who is close to completion. Not that you seek death, but that you are no longer ruled by it. You know it will come when it must, and when it does, you will not cling. You will exhale with grace, as one who has known the song of life and is ready for the final note. Not as an end, but as a return to the source of all sound. So if you find that your fear of death has softened, if you feel yourself leaning into its mystery with reverence rather than resistance, if you live more fully because you no longer need to live forever, then you may be closer to the threshold than you think, not of death, but of completion. And that is not something to fear, that is something to bless. 4. Sign 4. Unexplainable synchronicities and patterned reality. At some point in your journey, the universe stops whispering and starts responding, not with thunder or spectacle, but with quiet, precise, and almost impossible alignment. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they message you within minutes. You utter a question in the silence of your mind, and the answer appears on a billboard, in a stranger's sentence, in the next line of a song you're about to give up, and a door opens. You feel lost, and a sign appears. Over and over again, the illusion of coincidence begins to break, and in its place rises a new awareness. Reality is not random, it's relational. This is one of the most sacred signs of a soul approaching its final incarnation. Life begins to move with you, not against you. The universe becomes less like a machine you must fight to control, and more like a living field of intelligence, a presence that listens, that answers, that remembers. You stop believing in luck. You stop needing proof, because what once seemed like isolated events now form a pattern so intricate, so intimate, that denial becomes far more irrational than faith. The shift does not begin in the outer world, it begins within. As your consciousness expands, your perception shifts. You no longer see reality as a fixed structure, but as something pliable, responsive. You begin to recognize that your thoughts, your emotions, your very intention are shaping what you experience. And then life responds, not just occasionally, but continually. Not vaguely, but with precision so poetic it takes your breath away. At first you may doubt it. You may call it coincidence. You may fear that you're just projecting meaning where there is none. But as the pattern repeats, as the frequency rises, as the alignment becomes undeniable, you stop arguing with the mystery, you begin to listen. And what you hear is not chaos, but conversation. This isn't magic, it isn't superstition. It is a glimpse into the deeper nature of reality itself. Science has begun to scratch the surface of this truth, that consciousness may not be in the universe, but of it. That observation itself changes the observed. That the very fabric of existence responds to awareness, and you, as a soul nearing the end of the cycle, begin to live not from control, but from co-creation. You stop pushing, you start aligning. Instead of chasing goals from a place of lack, you begin to act from presence, and the doors open. Instead of forcing relationships, you radiate clarity, and the right people arrive. You notice that when your intention is pure, your path unfolds without friction. Not because life has become easy, but because you have become attuned. You are no longer swimming upstream. You are moving with the current of something far larger than yourself. And this current speaks in a language older than words. It speaks through numbers that repeat, symbols that appear in your dreams and then again in waking life, a gut feeling that proves true again and again. You might begin seeing patterns, 1111, 333, animals crossing your path at just the right moment, themes repeating in conversations with people who've never met. These are not accidents. They are alignments, invitations. confirmations. You are not imagining it, you are remembering how reality truly works. This level of synchronicity doesn't just make life feel magical, it also awakens responsibility. Because once you realize that the universe is mirroring you, you begin to ask, what am I sending out? What am I choosing to believe? You begin to understand that your inner world is not separate from the outer. The thoughts you dwell in, the feelings you nurture, the stories you repeat, these are not just passive experiences. They are seeds, and the more conscious you become, the more you begin to plant wisely. As a result, your life begins to simplify, not because nothing happens, but because everything starts to happen on purpose. The noise lessens, the detours shorten, the signs get clearer. You feel as though something deep beneath the surface has started guiding the script. And the beauty is, you're not surrendering control to something outside of you, you're surrendering control to something truer within you. People around you may not understand. They may still see the world as random, competitive, disconnected. But you no longer need to convince them, because your life itself becomes the evidence. The way peace arrives in chaos, the way clarity meets confusion, the way provision appears exactly when you stop clinging. These are not things you read in a book or heard in a sermon. These are truths you now embody. Synchronicity becomes your prayer language, alignment becomes your compass, and gratitude becomes your posture. You no longer ask for proof, you give thanks for the signs. Because the signs are not just spiritual gimmicks. They are the fingerprints of grace. They are the coordinates left for you by your higher self. Breadcrumbs from the soul that already remembers the way. And yet, this isn't about becoming invincible. You still face challenges, you still walk through valleys. But now you walk with the awareness that nothing is wasted. Every delay holds timing. Every detour holds instruction. Every difficulty holds a key. You stop resisting life and begin reading it. Every event becomes a verse. Every encounter a parable. Every moment a message. And as this awareness deepens, you no longer look at the sky asking for answers. You begin to realize you are part of the answer. You are not merely living in the universe. You are living with it, as it, through it. And this shift from passive participant to conscious co-creator is the hallmark of a soul on the verge of liberation. So if your life has begun to echo with patterns that speak to you, if the world responds to your thoughts like a mirror instead of a wall, if you feel like you're being gently guided by something greater, but also something familiar, then do not question your sanity. Question your smallness. Because you are not crazy, you are awakening, and the universe is not a stranger, it is your oldest companion. 5. Sign 5. A dissolving of desire and attachment to achievement. There comes a quiet moment in the soul's journey when striving begins to fall away. Not in defeat, not in exhaustion, but in revelation. The fire that once burned for greatness dims into a steady glow. The hunger for titles, for approval, for worldly victory slowly dissolves like fog at sunrise. You still wake up each day, you still dream, create, act, but the reason why has changed. You are no longer chasing something outside of yourself. You are no longer running from a sense of lack. You have begun to realize that what you sought was never out there to begin with. This is not laziness. This is not giving up. This is liberation. The letting go of desperate effort is not weakness. It is wisdom. Because you have played this game before, you've built empires. You've been the warrior, the king, the priest, the rebel, the savior. You've lived lives of grandeur and obscurity. You've achieved, conquered, won, and still, something always remained unfinished. No trophy could touch the eternal. No applause could fill the infinite. And now, in this life, your soul remembers. You may find yourself confused at first. Why don't you feel that old ambition anymore? Why doesn't praise ignite you? Why does the idea of more now feel empty, even heavy? The world around you still runs on desire, still worships hustle, still defines worth by results. And yet, you find yourself moving slower, breathing deeper, no longer obsessed with becoming someone, but rather being who you already are. You're not resisting effort, you're releasing attachment. You still take action, but not to prove yourself. You still create, but not for applause. Your work flows from inner fullness, not from inner fracture. You begin to do things not because they elevate your status, but because they express your soul. There is no rush, no panic, no performance. You are not climbing anymore, you are growing. Not up, but inward. This shift is subtle but seismic, and it unnerves the world. People may question your drive. They may call you unmotivated, too soft, too passive. But they do not see the fire beneath your stillness. They do not hear the silence that speaks louder than noise. You are not quitting the world. You are reclaiming your place in it without being bound by its illusions. Where once you pursued relationships out of longing, now you welcome connection from wholeness. Where once you feared failure, now you see it as feedback. Where once you hustled to earn love, now you simply are love, and let the rest unfold. The desperation dissolves, the inner proving fades. You are no longer willing to pay for acceptance with pieces of your soul, and what arises in its place is a presence so rare, so rooted, that it can only come from lifetimes of forgetting and remembering. You carry a calmness that doesn't come from having everything figured out, but from no longer needing to. You are content, not because everything is perfect, but because your peace is no longer conditional. You don't need every answer because you trust the question. You don't need to rush forward because you've begun to see that you're already home. The soul in its final incarnations has no need to climb the same ladder again. It recognizes the illusion of lack that fuels the world's addiction to ambition. It knows that more success will not quiet the ache, because the ache was never about success. The ache was the soul's homesickness. For stillness, for truth, for the unshakable joy of simply being. This doesn't mean you lose passion. On the contrary, your passion becomes pure. You are no longer driven by ego, but by essence. Your dreams may remain, but they are not burdens. They are offerings. You live with intention, but without tension. You act with devotion, but not with desperation. There is sacred purpose in your movement now, not because you seek validation, but because you are expressing the divine through your being. And the beautiful paradox is this: the less you cling, the more things flow. The less you grasp, the more life gives. The less you strive, the more aligned you become. You realize that manifestation is not about obsession, but resonance. You don't get what you want, you receive what you are. And who you are is becoming more and more in tune with the greater unfolding. This state can be disorienting at first. When the fire of ambition dims, you may wonder if something is wrong. You may try to reignite it, to feel like your old self again. But you are not meant to go back. That fire was necessary once, but it has served its purpose. Now you are entering a quieter, truer flame. A flame that does not burn. It illuminates. You are not lost. You are being refined. What once moved you no longer does, not because you are empty, but because you are full. And from that fullness comes a life of extraordinary simplicity, beauty, and clarity. You may find yourself creating art without needing it to be seen, speaking truth without needing it to be praised, loving without needing to be loved back, acting without attachment to outcomes, and in that space, you begin to taste what real freedom feels like. You are not here to prove your worth, you are here to embody it. You are not here to win the game, you are here to realize that the game was always optional. You do not have to become more, you only have to remember that you are already enough. So if the fire of striving has begun to flicker, if your heart is no longer stirred by the chase, if you find peace in stillness and joy in simply being, then trust this unfolding. You are not failing, you are finishing, and the soul that finishes well does so, not with applause, but with peace. 6. Sign 6. Perceiving reality as a construct, not foundation. There comes a time in the soul's long journey when the world begins to feel less solid, less like a permanent stage, and more like a passing dream. The streets are still there, the sky still opens every morning, but something within you starts to shift. It's as if the surface of reality has softened, and through its seams something deeper, truer, begins to shine. You don't quite know how to explain it. Everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same. You touch a cup, you walk through a room, you sit in a conversation, and yet part of you is aware this is not the whole story. You begin to sense that what you've called reality may not be the foundation of existence, but rather its reflection. A projected film, a layered field, a construct. Not a lie, but not the full truth either. Just as a shadow is not a deception, but merely a trace of something more solid, more alive, more real, you start to realize that this physical world is not the source, but the surface, the echo, not the voice. This shift doesn't come as a theory or a belief. It arrives as an experience, subtle at first, like déjà vu, like a dream that bleeds into waking. Perhaps you begin to notice that your perception shapes your experience more than you ever realized, that your thoughts color the world around you, that emotions seem to ripple outward and then return to you in form. You start to question, is the world happening to me or with me? For a soul nearing its final incarnation, this question is not philosophical, it's personal, because you have begun to awaken not just to the spiritual realm, but to the illusion of separation itself, the illusion that you are merely a body moving through space, the illusion that time is a straight line, the illusion that things are as they appear. You begin to feel like life is layered, like there are multiple frequencies playing at once, and most people are tuned to only one. But now you are hearing two songs at the same time, the visible and the invisible, the physical and the metaphysical, the constructed and the eternal. It can be disorienting. One moment you are engaged in the everyday, the next you are watching it from above, as if your soul is reminding you, this is the dream, don't fall asleep again. You might notice how quickly reality reflects your internal state. When you shift within, the world shifts around you. When you act from fear, fear multiplies. When you surrender to love, love meets you in places you didn't expect. These are not coincidences. They are reminders, gentle nudges from the universe to say, you are not merely in the world, you are weaving it. This realization brings humility and awe, because you begin to understand that all of it, the names, the roles, the structures, is temporary. It is scaffolding for the soul. A sacred simulation designed not to trap you, but to teach you. And when the lessons are near completion, the walls begin to shimmer. The illusion becomes apparent, not to be feared, but to be honored. Because even illusions can be holy when their purpose is awakening. This awakening doesn't make you superior. It makes you more present, because now every moment becomes more than it appears. A conversation is not just words, it's energy exchange. A tree is not just wood and leaves, it is a symbol, a teacher, a consciousness in disguise. The world becomes alive again, not as a fixed machine, but as a living mirror. Everything you see is speaking. Everything reflects you. You stop needing the world to prove itself to you. You stop asking for reality to justify itself. Instead, you begin to listen, to watch, to decode. You see how systems are built, how identity is crafted, how language, culture, success, all of it is a story, a collective dream, and while others may still be lost inside it, You are slowly waking up within it. This shift can be lonely. Others may not understand when you say none of this feels quite real anymore. They may think you're disassociating, but you are not escaping, you are seeing. And what you're seeing is not emptiness, but design. You are beginning to recognize what mystics and quantum physicists alike have long whispered, that reality is not built from matter, but from meaning, and you are the interpreter. You are the dreamer, dreaming a world of form. And now, the dream is becoming lucid. In lucid dreaming, you realize you're dreaming, and that realization changes everything. You don't fight the dream, you use it. You explore, you create with intention, you move through it with awareness. This is what begins to happen in your waking life. You realize you can respond, influence, bless, not from ego, but from the understanding that you are consciousness moving through a field of mirrors. The more this awareness settles, the less tightly you grip anything. Not because you don't care, but because you finally understand nothing here is yours to keep. Not the body, not the possessions, not even the personality you've worn like clothing. These were never the point. The point was experience. The point was remembrance. The point was awakening through illusion, not in spite of it. So you begin to live differently. You speak more slowly. You listen more deeply. You laugh more easily, not because life is simple, but because you no longer expect it to be permanent. You let go more gently. You forgive more freely, because the game is no longer about winning, it's about waking. And waking means understanding that this world, beautiful, broken, brilliant, is not your prison, it is your mirror. It reflects where you are, but it is not where you belong. You belong to something wider, older, softer, and as you begin to dwell in that remembrance, reality doesn't vanish, it transforms. The colors become richer, the silence becomes sacred, the ordinary becomes mystical. You're still here, but not as before. You are walking through the same streets, but now with eyes that see through the veil. You are not just alive, you are aware. You no longer fear that the world is unreal. You honor it for what it is, a sacred dream. And in that reverence, you return, not to illusion, but to the love that allowed it all in the first place. So if you've started to feel that life is layered, if the solid world begins to flicker and deeper truths begin to surface, if the roles, the systems, the labels start to fall away, then you are not losing your grip. You are losing the illusion, and what remains is what's always been. Consciousness awake in its own creation. 7. Sign 7. Recognition of identity is temporary, and there comes a moment, not in your mind but in the marrow of your soul, when you stop asking, "Who am I?" and begin to see the question itself as part of the illusion. You look in the mirror and recognize the face, the name, the life story, and yet something in you remains untouched by all of it. You carry memories, preferences, beliefs, and roles, but you no longer mistake them for yourself. You are no longer clinging to the costume. You are watching the actor behind the mask. This is the sacred unraveling of identity. In the early stages of spiritual awakening, we try to redefine who we are. We swap one label for another. We go from achiever to seeker, from victim to survivor, from lost to found. But as the soul nears completion, a deeper revelation emerges. None of these identities were ever the truth. They were experiences, important, painful, beautiful, but ultimately temporary expressions of consciousness. You begin to sense that who you think you are, your personality, your habits, even your voice, is more like a lens than a self, a window through which awareness peers into this world for a brief and sacred moment. You are not the lens, you are the light passing through it. And as this realization takes root, the grip begins to loosen. You no longer need to defend your image. You no longer need to convince anyone of your worth. You stop trying to become something, because you've touched the place inside that never needed becoming, the self that was here before the stories began, the I before the me. This awareness doesn't make you indifferent or disconnected, it makes you deeply present. You listen more openly because you are no longer filtering every word through the story of me. You forgive more freely because you realize that holding on to pain is simply clinging to a character that no longer exists. You love more boldly because you're not trying to protect a fragile identity. You're expressing something eternal. There may come a time when you watch yourself in conversation and feel like you're reading lines. You walk into a room and feel the old persona rise, polite, witty, charismatic, but something in you smiles from behind it, knowing it's just a temporary role. You may still play the part, but now you do so consciously, not compulsively. And with that awareness comes peace. You begin to see how much of human life is driven by identity maintenance. People exhaust themselves defending a self they've outgrown. We cling to opinions, to reputations, to history, because we think they make us real. But you are no longer satisfied with being real. You want to be free. And freedom means letting go of the stories that once gave you comfort, but now feel too small for who you've become. It can be disorienting at first. You might say, if I'm not this, then who am I? But this is the beginning of true awakening, not finding a better answer, but finally becoming still enough to live inside the question. And in that stillness, something ancient and quiet begins to rise. Not a new identity, but a recognition: I am that which observes. I am that which knows. I am that which is aware of all this, but not bound by it. This is not a thought, it is a knowing, a direct experience, a returning, and once you've tasted it, you can never fully go back. This detachment from identity does not make you disappear from the world. It allows you to fully enter it. You stop performing and start embodying. You move through the world without needing to leave a mark, because you now live from the understanding that you are the space through which the world moves, and that space is eternal, unshaken, untouched. Even the labels we cling to in spirituality, empath, starseed, old soul, mystic, begin to dissolve. They are not wrong, they are just temporary scaffolding, holding the shape of your becoming. But once you begin to live from the soul, you realize that even these forms cannot hold what you are. You are not a role in the great play, you are the screen upon which all roles appear. You may find that grief rises not for what you've lost, but for how long you lived believing you were small. You grieve the years spent chasing approval, battling shame, clinging to masks. But this grief is sacred. It washes you clean. It strips away the false so the true can emerge. Not as something new, but as something remembered. In the silence that follows, you begin to experience yourself differently. Not as a single person moving through time, but as a point of light in a vast, breathing intelligence. You feel both infinitesimal and infinite. You are not someone, you are awareness itself, momentarily dreaming of being human. And from this space, everything changes. Your work becomes an offering, not a proving ground. Your relationships become sacred mirrors, not validation systems. Your life becomes a ceremony, not a competition. You are still you, but no longer only you. You are the field behind the form, the spaciousness behind the story, the stillness that was always there, waiting patiently beneath the noise. So if your identity has begun to feel more like clothing than skin, if you catch glimpses of yourself beyond the name, beyond the history, beyond even the personality, if you feel like something vast is breathing through your small self, then don't be afraid. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the mask. And what remains is not a better version of you. What remains is truth. 8. Sign 8. Boundless empathy beyond the self. There is a kind of empathy that doesn't come from the heart, it comes from the soul. It is not learned through psychology or social expectation, but through lifetimes of suffering, healing, remembering. It arrives like a quiet flood, washing away the lines between self and other. You begin to feel not just for others, but as them. Their pain is not a story you sympathize with. It pulses through your own nervous system. Their joy is not just something you celebrate, it vibrates in your chest like a forgotten song you somehow already knew. And you realize you are no longer separate. You never truly were. This is the 8th sign. The emergence of a boundless empathy that transcends the conventional boundaries of identity, species, even matter itself. You do not choose to be compassionate. You are compassion. It flows from you effortlessly, not as performance, but as presence. You don't need to try to care. It would take effort not to. Something in you has softened to the point of transparency. You have become like a window through which divine love sees itself in all forms. It doesn't mean you are emotionally overwhelmed or constantly in pain. It means that you have stopped closing the door. You no longer guard your heart with armor forged in fear. You do not flinch from suffering, nor cling to bliss. You allow all of it to move through you, trusting that none of it will destroy you, because what you are is indestructible. Empathy, in this form, is not fragility. It is courage, refined by lifetimes. You may find yourself crying in the presence of strangers, not from sadness, but from recognition. You may feel sudden waves of compassion in the grocery store, on the sidewalk, in traffic, because the soul in front of you is you, wearing a different face. This isn't an idea or belief system. It is visceral, it is cellular, it is undeniable. You do not need to agree with someone to feel them. You do not need to like someone to love them. And this love extends beyond the human world. You start to feel it toward trees, animals, rivers, even places. You might hold a dying leaf in your palm and feel the holiness of its ending. You might look into the eyes of a stray animal and see something ancient and familiar looking back. You begin to sense consciousness everywhere, not as a theory, but as truth vibrating through form. A rock is not inert, it is resting. A storm is not chaos. It is language. You no longer look at the world from the outside, you feel the world from within. This kind of empathy often makes you ache, but not with despair. It is a sacred ache, a yearning to protect what is holy, to ease what is hurting, to awaken what is sleeping. You stop asking, "What can I get from this moment?" and start asking, "What can I give to it?" Service becomes your natural orientation. Not because you should, but because you can't help it. To ignore suffering would be to ignore yourself. To withhold love would be to deny your very nature. This doesn't mean you become naive or boundaryless. In fact, your boundaries may become clearer than ever, not from self-protection, but from clarity. You know that you cannot heal others by draining yourself. You begin to give from overflow, not depletion. And you understand that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to walk away, to speak the hard truth, or to stand in silence. Because empathy isn't weak, it is wisdom that has learned to feel without losing itself. People may notice something different in you. They may come to you without knowing why. You listen differently. You see what's not being said. You hold space in a way that makes others feel safe to unravel. You become a sanctuary, not because you try to be, but because your presence reminds them of what they are beneath the pain. You become less interested in judging and more interested in understanding. You see trauma, fear, anger, and instead of reacting, you ask, "Where does it hurt?" Not with pity, but with reverence. This level of empathy cannot be faked. It cannot be forced. It is not the performance of a spiritual ego. It is the natural expression of a soul that has seen itself in 1,000 forms, a soul that has been the villain and the victim, the child and the elder, the silent and the screaming. A soul that no longer needs to prove its worth, and so has nothing left to defend. This empathy doesn't just change how you relate to others, it transforms how you relate to yourself. You begin to meet your own wounds with tenderness, not judgment. You stop dividing your inner world into good and bad, healed and broken. You see all of it as sacred material, raw clay in the hands of consciousness sculpting itself toward wholeness. You stop rejecting the parts of you that are still learning, still struggling, still afraid, because now you understand they too are part of the one. And perhaps the most beautiful shift of all is that this empathy doesn't demand applause. You don't need to be seen as kind or wise or good. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to call it anything. You just live it, breathe it, radiate it. Quietly, powerfully, like a candle in a dark room, your presence becomes illumination. Not because you say the right things, but because you are lit from within. So if you find yourself feeling the emotions of others as your own, if you cry more easily, love more fiercely, and hurt more deeply, not just for yourself, but for the world, if your heart seems to beat in rhythm with the trees, the skies, the ones forgotten, then you are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are becoming whole. A soul that has remembered its unity with all of life is not far from completion, because the final lesson is never to rise above the world, but to love it so completely that you no longer need to hold it at a distance. Sign 9. Liberation from repetitive patterns. There comes a quiet shift, not in what you face, but in how you move through it. The storms still arrive. The triggers still present themselves. The same people, the same dynamics, the same inner doubts, they all return like echoes from a distant life. But now you respond differently. You pause where you once reacted, you breathe where you once ran, and you realize the pattern is still there, but you are not. This is the 9th sign, the gentle liberation from repetitive cycles. Not because you forced your way out, but because you've outgrown the loop. You are no longer caught in the spiral. You are witnessing it from above. Throughout lifetimes, we repeat what remains unresolved. We attract lessons in new forms, but with familiar pain. We find ourselves in relationships that echo childhood wounds, careers that replay old beliefs, decisions that mimic lifetimes we no longer remember. Karma doesn't punish, it teaches. But the teaching continues until the soul integrates what the mind cannot understand. And in this lifetime, perhaps for the first time, you are no longer the student. You are becoming the witness. What once held power over you now passes through you. The old hooks no longer sink into the flesh of your identity, the shame, the pride, the defensiveness, the doubt. They still knock, but the door is no longer open. Not because you've shut yourself down, but because you've opened yourself up to something vaster than the wound. You are not bypassing the pain. You are meeting it differently, with presence, with breath, with love, and most of all with the knowing, this no longer defines me. This liberation is rarely loud. It is not marked by fireworks or grand declarations. It is subtle, silent. Like noticing you no longer need to prove your point, like realizing you don't feel guilt for choosing peace, like watching someone try to pull you into the old dance and feeling only compassion, not the compulsion to join, like hearing the voice of fear and responding with, "I see you, but I no longer believe you." You might look back at who you were 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 5 lives ago, and feel a holy astonishment. Not at what you've achieved, but at what you've released. Not at how strong you've become, but at how gently you now carry your strength. This is not the strength of resistance. It is the strength of surrender. And surrender at this level is not giving up. It is giving back, returning the weight that was never yours to carry. You begin to see how much energy you once spent holding stories together, trying to be consistent with a version of yourself you no longer resonate with. Trying to keep relationships afloat that no longer align, trying to fix what was never yours to fix. And now, you bless it. You bow to it, and you let it go. This is karma dissolving, not with fanfare, but with grace. Like winter releasing its hold to spring, like a bird no longer needing a cage. You have learned the lesson not with your intellect, but with your life. And because of that, the pattern no longer holds the same magnetic pull. You do not need to fight it, you simply do not feed it.
The irony is that nothing outside of you may change, yet everything inside you has. The same job, the same partner, the same daily rituals, but from a completely different frequency. Where once you clung, now you flow. Where once you feared, now you trust. Where once you repeated, now you respond. People may say you've changed. They may say you're softer, quieter, calmer, but you know the truth. You haven't become less. You've become clearer. The noise is gone. The inner war has quieted. The battlefield is now a garden. And in that garden, you begin to notice what's always been waiting. Joy without reason. Stillness without effort. Love without needing to be earned. You are no longer learning to heal. You are living from healing. You are no longer seeking your path. You are walking it, barefoot, grounded, awake. You are no longer defined by your history. You are remembered by your presence. This is the fruit of many lives. Not just this one. This is the residue of lifetimes spent forgetting, searching, striving, falling. And now something in you has risen, not above life, but into life. You are not transcending the world by escaping it. You are transcending it by fully embodying your place within it, with peace, with clarity, with light. You may not know exactly what comes next. The final incarnation is not marked by answers, but by freedom from the need to have them. You no longer grasp. You no longer resist. You simply become. And in that becoming, you align with the pulse of something eternal. So if the patterns that once ruled you now pass like clouds, if the storms still come, but you no longer collapse in their winds, if you feel more still than ever, even as life moves all around you, then you are not behind. You are not broken. You are complete. The cycle is not ending with a bang, but with a whisper, a breath, a remembrance. And now, perhaps for the first time in eons, you are not reacting, you are not repeating, you are ready. And so, if you have heard yourself in these signs, not with the ears, but with the soul, if something ancient in you stirred, not in curiosity, but in quiet recognition, then perhaps, beloved soul, you are no longer on the journey. You are arriving, not to a destination on a map, but to the remembering of who you were before time, to the space beyond questions, beyond form, beyond fear. You have lived, you have broken, you have risen, you have wept across centuries, you have loved across dimensions, you have carried burdens not even your current name remembers. And now you are laying them down. You are not ascending to escape the world. You are dissolving into it so fully, so completely, that there is no longer any you separate from it. This is not the end, this is the release. This is not the finish line, this is the folding of wings, the uncoiling of presence, the merging with the source from which all things were breathed into being. Do not fear the silence. It is not the absence of story. It is the voice before story ever began. You do not need another lesson. You do not need another battle. You do not need to strive one more time to become what you've always been. You are not the seeker anymore. You are the sought. You are not a soul looking for truth. You are the truth, remembering itself through the veil of a human life. So walk gently now. There is no need to rush, no need to prove, no need to return again. For the circle is closing, the gates are open, and all of heaven is not waiting for you. It is welcoming you back. Welcome home, old soul. Welcome home.